Hi everyone. Today we're going to do an introduction to William Shakespeare. So who's this guy? We've already read his Sonnet 18. We've heard a ton about him. We've talked about Romeo and Juliet and other plays in class. But who is this guy? Where did he come from? When was he born? Let's find out. So here's the house he was born in. Nice little shack in Stratford-upon-Avon. Actually, he was born into a pretty wealthy family. His dad was a glover. He made leather gloves and had compared to other people, more money. He also was the mayor of Stratford. And unfortunately, when William was probably early teens, his dad jacked some money from the city council and got in trouble for embezzlement. So he got canned. And so William had to actually get a job. And instead of the posh education that he had been working on and all of the classics and all of that, he had to go find a job and support his family. He was born in 1564, and it was during the time of the reign of Queen Elizabeth, and actually 4 years after. And Queen Elizabeth was a monarch that ruled England for about 40 years, and during that time brought great stability and calmness to England that had been fighting wars and wars and had monarchs that only lasted for 2 or 3 years or just 6 months. And so for her to be in there and be in charge for such a long period of time, they had a lot of growth, a lot of expansion. She was a great leader for the country. There were criticisms of her. People complained about a lot of things that she did, just like any ruler. But she was able to have the people around her work really hard to keep England safe. At the time, the naval power of the world was Spain, and Spain wanted to conquer England pretty badly. In 1588, there was a set of ships from Spain that sailed to England to go put a hurting on England. It's called the Spanish Armada, and with Queen Elizabeth's guidance, the English Navy routed the Spanish and became the superpower of the world after that battle. So this is all during the time of Shakespeare. And she was a great lover of drama and of going to plays, and she loved seeing the new Shakespeare play. And because of her patronage, his troupe, his group of actors, had great success in London. When he was 18, he married Anne Hathaway, who was 26 and already pregnant. So there's a lot of speculation about their marriage. Some people say, oh yeah, he went to London, he wrote plays and just sent all the money home and his family lived well. But there's a lot of documentation that shows that maybe they didn't have the greatest relationship. When Shakespeare died, he left in his will everything to his daughters, nothing to Anne except their second best bed and the sheets and blankets from the second best bed. And that's it. And this is a hugely wealthy guy who owned the biggest house in Stratford. So we can read into that what we want. But on the surface, it doesn't look like a super happy thing. This is not the Anne Hathaway that he married. I just put that in there. So this is the picture of the happy family. William and his wife and their kids, Susanna and Judith and Hamnet. And Judith and Hamnet were twins that came the year after Susanna was born. So in 1585, we stopped having documented evidence of Shakespeare's existence, which during that time was not a hard thing. Written records were weird, spelling didn't count. There wasn't a great database for everybody's births and deaths and things like that. So to say he disappeared, he's probably just out making a living somewhere. Eventually, though, he crops up in London in 1591 as a playwright, and he'd apparently gone to London to be an actor, which is what he really wanted to do, but he decided that there weren't any plays that were good enough for his amazing acting talent, so he had to write them himself. And there is evidence that he actually acted in a couple of his plays, but mainly his fame grew with the writing of his plays. This is in 1592. There's a written reference to an upstart crow. It was in the newspaper, and someone said, "Oh yeah, who is this new guy that's writing plays?" And then other people were saying, "Oh, he's great. We have to go see this." He had been busy writing plays, poetry, establishing himself in the theater world, cranking out all kinds of things. Unfortunately, in 1593, 1592, 1593, a plague hit London, which we can kind of identify with right now. And everything was closed. Oh my gosh, the stores, everything, and the theaters. And so during that time, Shakespeare and some of his troupe went out into the country outside of London and performed there. He also just went home and wrote a ton of sonnets and other things and hung out with his family. Eventually, when the theaters opened back up, Shakespeare and his men, along with some backing from the government, were able to build a beautiful theater called the Globe in London. The Commoners, it was an open air theater with no roof, and most commoners stood to watch the plays. They had to pay a whole penny to get in and stand and watch, and it was interactive. They would boo and hiss the characters on stage and clap and be excited about what was happening. If you wanted to sit, you had to pay 2 pennies. And up in the rafters were special seats for the Queen and the people that she had brought with her. This is what the Globe looks like today. It's in London. I went past it last summer, and it's just beautiful. It's a lot of crowds there, but it's super cool. It has burned down a couple times and been rebuilt, but this is what it looks like right now. And you can go see Shakespeare plays there all the time. So this guy that we still read in 2020, I mean, that's amazing that he wrote primarily in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and we still read a lot of his stuff. And what caused his writing to be so lasting in everything that we do? And I have lots of theories. I think that one of the things is that he was able to tap into humanity and tell people stories, conflicts between parents and kids, and lovers and countries, and talking about arrogance and the right to be the king, all kinds of wonderful things that we still think about today. He wrote 38 plays, 154 sonnets, lots of poetry, and he also collaborated with other authors. There's also quite a bit of pretty solid speculation that he wrote other plays that have been lost, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit about why that would be. After he died in 1616, several years later, actually, his friends got together and they said, you know, it's weird that we don't have a place where all of his work is in one spot. It's not all written down, because during the plays, there was a lot of plagiarism and things like that went on. And so what Shakespeare did, and other playwrights at the time, they would write one character's part in a little tiny book and give them just that, just the words that they were going to say. And then there was a cue for when they needed to go on stage. So if you were playing Romeo, you had your book. If you were playing Juliet, you had your book. And then no one ever put those all together. So a group of Shakespeare's friends did. They gathered up all the evidence from all the plays, all the sonnets that they could find, and they put them into a book in 1623 called The First Folio. And this is the definitive collection of Shakespeare's works. There aren't very many of them around. If you dug in your attic or went to a yard sale and found a First Folio, you could retire right now. It's my goal. I'm going to find one. And but they're very, very cool. And because if we didn't have that, I think we would have lost most of the plays and most of the poetry. The biggest collection of First Folios is ironically stored in the United States in Washington, D.C. at the Folger Shakespeare Library. And in the cases in the picture here, you can see the hermetically sealed copies of the First Folio. You can't touch them with your own hands, but you can look at them and see what that looked like. One of the things that Shakespeare is known for with all of his writing is that if he couldn't find a word that described what he wanted to say, he made it up. And as a result, we have 3,000 or so more words in our language just because of him. And he added prefixes and suffixes to existing nouns. He made up whole new nouns altogether. If a word didn't fit in a line of iambic pentameter, he messed with the syllables. And because of that, our language is much richer. Here's an example of some of the words that he added to our language. I love it. Swagger, moonbeam, blushing, epileptic, lackluster. So there's lots of cool mysteries. And as we go through our unit and learn Romeo and Juliet, we're also going to talk about Shakespeare some more and some things surrounding his life and the mystery about him and some of the writing that he did. Some of those mysteries. Did he write the plays? There's a lot of people who think, oh, no, he didn't. There was someone else, Edward de Vere, an Earl of this or Duke of that, because they didn't want to be associated with something as low class as the stage or drama. Right now, the most strong evidence points to Shakespeare having written all of the things that he's credited with, but everybody's kind of open for some new evidence to show up. The sonnets were written for lots of different people. Some of them were written for other men, some for women, and people have speculated on his different relationships and things like that. During the time, though, I just have to say that socially, it was totally cool for men to tell other men and their best friends that they loved them. And it was a different kind of relationship, a different kind of sharing of your feelings and things like that between men, which by now, 2020, we don't do in the same way. And so because some of the sonnets were written for another man, it doesn't mean that they were having a romantic relationship. This one's fun. In Psalm 46, let me back up. King James Bible was assembled in 1611, and it was ordered to be put together by King James because prior to that, the Bibles that they had were inconsistently spelled, the typesetting was bizarre, and they needed the printing technology had improved, and they needed a better edition. And so a bunch of writers were tasked with putting that together. There's a lot of speculation that Shakespeare was on that team that worked on it. And Psalms 46 in the King James Bible, if you count 46 lines down from the top and up from the bottom, apparently the words shake and spear are in it. And there's speculation that he put his own name in the King James Bible. That is a total conspiracy theory, and we have no proof. Shakespeare's plays have been translated into 80 different languages. That's actually the truth. That's happened, including Klingon. Hamlet and Much Ado About Nothing have been translated into Klingon. And finally, he died in 1616 on his birthday, 52nd birthday. And at his grave site, there's this message, because very often in small graveyards and things like that around England, they were dug up and the bodies were moved. And so here he's putting a message that says, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man who spares these stones, and cursed be he who moves my bones." So you can rest assured no one has moved his bones. So finally, the next thing that we're going to be doing is Romeo and Juliet, and we'll do an introduction to the play, kind of where the setting, the characters. It is a tragedy, so everybody dies. So it's not a spoiler alert, it's just everybody dies. But it's a great story, and you guys are going to love it.